Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. I think I lost my earpiece. FRWC family, we greet you. We are excited to see you. How's everybody doing? Listen, what we need right now is for you to get a watch party started for us. We are coming live with the Last Supper. We are excited on this evening. We have some explosive guests coming your way. So each week we invite you to join us with your relaxed setting, right? It's a difficult topic that we are embarking. Me and my sister Doc there. So we invite you each week to bring your drink, get you a snack. My sister is usually eating some granola and some fruit and that kind of thing. If
and popcorn.
You do that. Popcorn too. Look at it looking all pretty. If Starburst is your thing, Skittles is your thing, no judgment zone. But what we want you to do is hit the links, subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook Live, let somebody know that you are on. We are so excited about this endeavor that we want the world to know that we are here, and anybody who cares about this topic, we want to join together. This is the kingdom at large, and we want everybody. We want everybody. So call your mom and them, your cousin and them. You know, we invite family, we invite friends, we invite foes, we invite people who love us and people who are not quite sure about us, and we invite strangers because this is a topic that's near and dear to our heart. So if you're joining us for the first time, this is the Last Supper, and we are going to simply be attacking relationships and how they impact the church at large and how they impact us in our daily lives. Doc, what you want to say this evening?
I think we got a good number of people who've been with us for a couple of weeks, so you know what our topic is about. And so we want to dive in. We are excited. As my sister said, we have some exciting guests. We have some guests with some personal experience dealing with this topic. And so we definitely want to hear from them. We want you to hear from them. We also want to engage you with some, you have some questions, you have some comments. We want to hear from you. You've been engaging every week. And we've been very appreciative of that. So if you have questions and you have statements you want to say, be involved in this process. As we have said from day one, we are not coming saying that we are experts. What we're saying is we have had experiences and we are just at a point where I said my sister had like a perfect storm that caused her to feel like, what can we do differently to stop this kind of thing from happening? It's almost, if you keep having the same thing happen and you keep doing the same things, we call that insane, sanity or insanity. And so if you keep doing the same thing and you want to get a different result, I think it's past time for us to kind of figure out how we get into these situations so that we can avoid getting into situations. And then how do we backtrack? How do we go and have relationships restored? And how do we do better? How can we model? It seems very simple because it's right in the Word of God. How we should be in relationship with people. Jesus modeled that for us. And that's why it is called the Last Supper, because he modeled it at the Last Supper table. And so we want to be, we say we want to be his hands and feet in the earth. We start off by examining our own relationships and our part in it. And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So we welcome you, and we want to get started. We got these guests. They ready, and we ready to hear from them, and we ready to hear from you.
Exactly. So you've already started your watch party, right? You've already let somebody know that we are on and we are about it, right? you have your drinks, and you have your snacks. And so without further ado, we are going to bring our panelists just to introduce themselves, just so you guys can get comfortable with them. We know them, we love them, we believe that they have great things to say about this topic. We believe, again, that they've had experience on both ends of this as leaders, as head leaders, as well as members. And so we are about to just blow the roof off of this thing this evening. So without further ado, we want to first bring to the Last Supper our Pastor Derren Thompson out of Harford County, Maryland.
Hey, good evening. How you guys doing?
We're good. How are you?
Good. I am Dr. Derren Thompson. I'm affectionately known by my members as Dr. Derren. I pastor the greatest church in Southern Harford County, Maryland, the Conquerors Church, and I am the lead pastor and momentumologist at that church. And I am grateful to be here tonight with both of you doctors, and I'm excited about our time together tonight.
Sweet. We want to come back and explain that momentologist.
Momentumologist, yes.
Momentumologist. You piqued my attention there. So we're going to get that at some point. Okay. So our next guest we want to bring to you this evening is Minister Siomara Wedderburn out of Glassboro, New Jersey.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Siomara Wedderburn, better known as Sio, and it is my joy to be with you guys on tonight. And I am a social worker by training, but I love creating healing spaces for folks to do their work. So that's what I do. He can be a momentologist. Well, I create healing spaces.
Well, listen, we're going to put the momentologist. I think we're still saying it wrong, right? Pastor D?
Yes, momentumologist.
Momentumologist. And we creating healing spaces. And we haven't even gotten started yet. Y'all better call somebody down the block and let them know what we're doing right here. This is about to be like, you're not going to have a word for it tomorrow. But listen, trust me, we good. All right. Last but not least, we're bringing Pastor Vorlea Chaney from Sewell, New Jersey with us this evening.
Well, hello, everybody. Hello. Dr. Momentumologist. God bless you to Dr. Paula, Dr. Tony, and God bless you, Miss Healing Spaces. CEO. So my name is Vorlea Chaney. I'm one of the co-founding pastors of Destined to Worship Ministries. And listen, there's a lot of things that I do, but this is what is at my heart, to help believers create capacity to live their God life. That's what I do. That's who I am.
Sweet. Listen here. We got capacity. We got healing spaces. We got momentumology.
Yes.
We are live and we are in the place, and we're going to just jump right in. We're not going to waste a bit of this time. We're going to be great stewards of this hour that we had. We promise not to keep you long, and we want to soak the juices out of these panelists here. We are so excited to hear from them, as will you be when this hour is over. So we're going to jump right in. We are going to pose questions to the panelists, and as they feel led, they are going to respond. We continue to invite you to interact with us. Send us questions that you might have for them. Send us comments much like you did last week and the week before. We will get in all that we can get in. And I'll tell you the value of the comments that you're sending. Just this week, my husband and I had a situation, and literally in the midst of the situation, he really pulled one of the suggestions that was given last week and said, wait a minute, maybe did somebody say a mediator might be a good idea? Do we have anybody that can be a mediator? And I was really encouraged by that, and already just starting the fire going, already starting movement where he thought of something that was suggested in the Last Supper for our situation. So listen, grab a pen, grab some paper, grab your momentum, because we gonna do it all this evening. Our first question that we have for the panelists here is, how have broken relationships in the church impacted you? And we'll put that question up so you can already see it if you're just joining us. How have broken relationships in the church impacted you?
Don't you all go at the same time?
I was going to let one of the ladies go first.
Consume it.
So go ahead, Miss Healing Space.
All right. I was going to say that, we all find ourselves in situations where, relationships are challenged. And I know I have personally experienced the brokenness that one feels, the hurt, the pain that comes with, broken relationships and the confusion. I think sometimes, particularly when it comes to broken relationships in the church, with church leaders and, titles. And when we get into that space, I think often sometimes we doubt ourselves and we doubt, what the situation is telling us. But I definitely have found myself in those spaces, before God, feeling every bit of the hurt and the pain that comes from those relationships being severed and broken.
Wow.
What do you do with that, Theo? Or what
So,
have you done with that?
Yeah. So I've taken that to God, and I've learned that we're not exempt, as Christians from our humanity. I think a lot of times we spiritualize these things and we say we get caught up in the religion and forget that we are human and that these things will come up for us. And so definitely taking it to prayer to God, but also seeking to understand what the situation is, seeking to reconcile, seeking and taking the steps that are necessary. It's not just about praying and going before God, but then going back to that person as the Bible instructs us. Right. And saying, I'm sorry for the offense, and then seeking reconciliation. But, every situation is different. But I think that understanding that I think choosing love has always been one of the things that I have come back to. Right. God tells us to love our neighbor. And I think I always think about, what does love do in this situation, regardless of the offense, and also remembering to forgive. And getting to that place of being able to forgive and take that step of going to the other person.
So we already getting excited here. So listen, you got to be writing this stuff down. At this juncture, we're literally trying to see about the impact, and so far, hurt and pain. I know that a lot of you can attest to that, the impact of hurt and pain. So again, how have broken relationships impacted you?
As I think about that question, it's a great question. And in thinking about it, I was reminded of the late, great Dr. Maya Angelou, who said, when people show you who they are, believe them. And I think for me, I didn't believe that what I had actually seen in the church happened to other people. I never thought that it could happen to me. I never thought that the hurt that I saw being attached to other people and afflicted on other people, I never thought that would happen to me. I never thought that the lies that were being told about other people, surely that's not going to happen to me. I never thought that the betrayal that I saw, never thought that would happen to me. But I should have taken note of all of the warning signs that what I saw happen to other people, what I actually saw, that there was a common denominator, and the common denominator was the person that was at the center of hurting people. So how has it affected me? It's affected and impacted the way that I trust. It's affected and impacted the way that I love. I love hard, and I probably, before I experienced broken relationships in the church, I probably would have loved harder than I love now. So it impacted, the way that I love. I'm a lot better now. I really believe that I'm healed now. But when you're going through that thing, especially when you approach it from the vantage point, that would never happen to me. You learn quickly that, in many instances, you are not exempt.
Wow.
So as a result of that situation, how do you handle relationships, or how do you approach relationships now?
I am very guarded, and I recognize that I have to let people be people. I think that when you are in a position of authority and a position of leadership, in corporate America, I expect certain things. I expect it to be a crab tree and crabs in the bucket. I expect that people are really not going to do what they say. But in the house of God, I had an expectation that when you said you were going to do something, that you were going to do it. I had an expectation that people in the church didn't lie. Surely they didn't lie. This is the house of God. So what I have learned is I've got to let people be people, and I've got to learn that I can never complain about what I permit. When I allow you to do certain things to me and you do it over and over and over, at some point, I have to say, you know what? I don't deserve this, and I don't have to take this.
Say so. Wow.
So I think too, I agree with Dr. Derren that it's a really, really good question. And so I, like Dr. Derren, like CO, I've been impacted, by broken relationships in the church. But I think that in no different way, honestly, in no different way than I have been impacted by broken relationships in life. Really. I had a broken relationship with my father, the man that was responsible for me to come into the earth. If I'm more connected to him than I am anybody. And if my relationship with him could be broken, then I think what it has done for me is set the stage that my relationship with anybody that can be broken. And that, how it has impacted me is, yes, it causes self-doubt, right? But the biggest issue for me is it unearthed my inadequacies.
Wow.
It unearthed in me, the reason, like, caused me to be reflective. How does this keep happening, right, to me? Why is this? Why forget about them? Why does it keep happening to me? Like Dr. Derren said, people, I can't complain about what I allow. Something about me allows me to be in the situations where people continue to treat me the same way.
Yeah.
It's something about me. And so after about the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th time, you have to begin to do this and ask God to search me. And what is it in me that I don't value myself enough, that I insist on people meeting me honestly in relationship, because that's how the relationship gets broken and hurt. Somewhere something goes awry. There's something that's not authentic in the relationship, right? Where people feel like they kind of got to hide who they really are until they just can't hide it no more, and it comes spilling out on me. You know what I mean? So how it has impacted me is, and now this is in the beginning, devastating. Go crawl up in the corner, put the blanket over your head. Woe is me. Caused me to, it unearth that self-pity and unearth that victim mentality and unearth some things in me. But God has blessed me and graced me now to come down the road. Not that I'm still not being impacted by broken relationships in the church, because I am, but there's a different stance. I think Seal talked about forgiveness and love, and let's just say deliverance.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just talk about deliverance, because sometimes we get hooked up and tangled up, and we actually need to be delivered from those relationships.
Now, you seem like that you was really feeling that. I want you to just talk. I feel like I'm gonna throw a couple dollars at you. I just need you to say right there. Because when you started talking, I was feeling something.
Yeah. Listen, sometimes the Apostle Paul said that we ought to not be entangled again.
Yeah.
In the yoke of bondage.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Something in us keeps us walking back into those entanglements.
I want you to stop. I want you to stop.
Something keeps us walking back into those entanglements. And not only that, there's this whole thing in the church. I don't know how we got here, where we can't be real with one another.
Right.
Right about it.
Definitely that.
Your stuff kind of stink over there right now. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean that I ain't for you, it doesn't mean that I'm not on your side.
Right.
It means it's this word that we don't use in the church, accountability.
Accountability.
It's
From the
accountability
pulpit to the door.
to the door.
Yeah.
To the
And
door.
I think that it's understood that there should be accountability on the floor, but none on the pulpit, or very little on the pulpit. So I wanted to ask you another question, Vorlea, because you said something about your dad, your relationship with your dad, and so the other relationships having an impact in the church. But my question for you were you expecting a different kind of relationship from people in the church? Or were you expecting the same kind of relationship that you had with your dad?
So yeah, I was expecting a different kind of relationship
Okay.
in the church, absolutely. But the reality of it is, God never told us to trust one another.
Right.
He ain't never told us to do that. Not that we shouldn't, but I did have certain expectations. But can I just be honest that in some of those relationships I failed?
Of course. And that's why I talked about in the beginning, what's our part in it? I believe that when relationships go bad, when they go awry, I believe that there is some ownership on both parts.
Mm-hmm.
Even if my ownership is I failed to see the signs, or I failed to speak up when I felt uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
I still have a part in it. So, and initially when relationships break up, I don't think that we should originally automatically look at other people. As you said, look at ourselves. Like, God, examine me, examine my heart. What's in me? Why do I keep ending up in this situation? What is it about me that I am allowing this situation? What about me that allowed this situation to go on for so long? What is it about me? So that, because this is the thing, a lot of us have already attested to the fact that we have been in this situation multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So experience is the greatest teacher that we can have. How come we have to be in a situation multiple times for us to get to the point where we say, enough is enough, and what can I do to make some changes or have some things change in my life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So we're moving here. Again, if you guys have questions, please send us. We just have this great compilation here that we want to utilize. And so we'll continue with our questions, but we want to hear from you as well. And so we've kind of delved into it a little bit already, but I want to ask this great panelist here. When you're talking about moving on and the healing process, we talked about capacity, we talked about momentum and, healing spaces. What literally have you learned? I know you guys have touched on it a little bit, but want to make it plain to the people. What have you learned in the healing process? What have you learned along the way? What are those things that you have sort of determined that the next time here again, I'm not going to fall in that same hole. I'm going to go across the street, when I see it coming. And, Pastor D already talked about Maya Angelou. Like, I'm going to believe them the first time, the next time. What are those things that you have literally learned along your journey that you can share with the kingdom?
I learned to let myself off the hook. I think that while I was dealing with, while I was working through, while I was in the middle of the hurt, I did, like everyone has already just kind of mentioned, I looked to say, what could I have done? But then when I realized that, I needed to let myself off the hook and not hold myself captive for what I missed, what I didn't see, what I didn't say. I had to let myself off the hook. I had to decide that tomorrow was going to be better than today. And then as I've journeyed through that process, as I learned that I had to let myself off the hook, I had to learn that I needed to let the person that caused the hurt, I had to let them off the hook and recognize people can't give you what they don't know to give you. People can't give you what they don't have, what they've not been taught. They can't. And I think that what I was doing, I was looking for something that was reserved for not that person, but was reserved for God. See, one of the things that God had to teach me is that, let him off the hook, because you have been looking for what is only reserved for me to do in your life, you've been looking at another man to do. And that's not his responsibility. He can only do for you what he knows to do. He can only do for you what, and then sometimes we say it all the time, hurt people will hurt other people. And I had that person was hurting, had broken relationships and all of that in their own life. And so I had to let me and him off the hook and really allow God to do what God said that he would do. He said that he would be a way maker, a bridge over troubled waters, a bird in there. He told us that he was going to do all that, but and I can't speak for nobody, but I was reserving that space that should have only been reserved for him. I was reserving that for somebody else. So I learned, let myself off the hook, but then I heard, let that person off the hook too.
Good.
Yeah.
I agree with that. You spoke one of my terms, and you've heard me say it before. One of the things that we get in trouble for is expecting things from people that people are not capable. Everybody don't have the capacity to give you what you think you need from them. It's all about capacity. And we frustrate ourselves when we put ourselves in a position where we consistently are seeking something from somebody that they just don't have the capacity to give. And I like what you said. You are absolutely right. Let them off the hook. Don't hold them hostage trying to get something from them that you can't get. And that's not just in the church. That's in general in relationships. All relationships. You got to know what people have the capacity to give. And when they cannot give anything else, you got to let them off the hook. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
I'm sorry. Let me just share this really quickly. My sister has said it like often. This whole thing really was birthed out of my husband and I getting news that someone with a broken relationship and us went on to be with the Lord. And we no longer have that opportunity. It's not like there was not any attempts and those kind of things. But what we don't want to have do is lose time or think we have more time than we think we have when things are resolvable, that we don't allow it to be a funeral that causes us to try to engage in these talks is what I want to say. People are still here. And when it's possible, we might want to make some efforts and keep making the efforts even when you have made some.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something, Dr. Derren?
Nope, I'm gonna wait for you. Go ahead, Pastor.
So I think this Dr. Derren hit on so many things. That whole the Bible tells us to set our affections. It tells us where to set our affections. It says set our affections on things above, not on things in the earth.
Right.
We have to. We cannot allow ourselves in the body of Christ to. We cannot allow what we do, our responses, how we engage one another, to be dictated by our emotions. We just can't. God gave us our emotions, and they have a place, but they cannot be the authority that rules us in our life. But I agree, Dr. Derren, you have to let yourself go. You got to let yourself off the hook. You got to let the other person go. But the other thing is sticking close to the word of God, right? This is like the crucifying of the flesh. We got to keep God at the center of everything, even when relationships go awry. God, what do you want out of this? What is my posture in this? Even when you make attempt to, it's about managing your expectations.
Yes.
Right? It's managing your expectations, identifying, being able to know what a person is capable of and what they're not capable of. And the thought that came to me is really from my mentor, my spiritual mom, my coach, my life coach, something that about deliverance. This is what I learned about deliverance. You are delivered when you respond differently.
Right.
when you do differently, when you don't go back to what was comfortable, to backbite, to ruminate over it, to talk about it a million times and say
Get
the same
revenge.
thing, and yes, and get everybody on the phone and talk about it and all those things, when really, when our relationships go awry, I believe our first response ought to be our knees. That we ought to go to our knees in the Word, and really begin to understand that this is what always comes. This is the thought that I always have. This is the thought that in heaven, one of us, if we don't get it together, if we hide unforgiveness in our heart, somebody not going to be there, because this stuff don't exist there. It just doesn't exist. And it is our responsibility as Christians. The Bible tells us it's our responsibility to live at peace, to seek peace, pursue it, live at peace with all men, and that we have been given this ministry of reconciliation. Now, sometimes that ministry of reconciliation is going to have me here and you there.
Right.
You ain't never lied.
Because it's about it's not necessarily, right? It don't necessarily put us like this, not necessarily, but it's about where am I in my heart in this situation. And I think that's the issue. Where am I in my heart? I have had to, even recently, right, had to like deal with some stuff that started coming up that I thought, oh, wait a minute, I thought I had dealt with this, but it really wasn't dealt with. So I just think that as the body of Christ, we just ought not go too far away from the Word of God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
We err every time we do.
Yeah, and that's huge, because you made a great point. And I always use, and I always say, you mentioned that you asked the question, what is the lesson here? And that's one of my biggest things. I'm always asking, what am I supposed to learn while I'm going through this situation? Because I believe that a lesson not learned from shall be repeated.
My goodness.
So I gotta learn. So I'm constantly in God's face. Look, I don't want to deal with this again. I don't want to go through it. So whatever it is that I'm supposed to get while I'm here, let me get it, because I don't want to come back to this place. And I recognize that a lesson not learned from, it will always be repeated.
Say that.
That's right. And there's so much to learn. Learn about me, learn about the person, and learn about God.
Come on now. Yeah.
And learn about God. What do I get to learn about God in this? Because this is the thing. I think somebody said it. I don't want to keep repeating this. Right? I want to do the next time better.
That's right.
I want to do that better. I want to handle conflict better the next time.
Certainly.
I want to approach, I want to come to relationship better. In other words, for me, my testimony, my transparency is people, I think, loved being in relationship with me because I was the yes girl. Can I just tell the truth?
Tell the truth.
I ain't gonna tell you about your stuff.
Yeah.
That's who I used to be.
No, because it benefits them. They're not going to tell you because it benefits them. Why would they tell you that?
They on the other end. They on the other end.
The minute you change up on them, then now we have a problem. Now we have a conflict.
What you got something? You ain't had nothing to say back then. What? Why you?
Why you got something to say now? Right.
Y'all know we got a panel full of preachers here, right? So what I was hoping my backstage technician could give me some of that Alex Trebek music, the kind of. We ain't got but an hour here. We got a bunch of preachers. We got a lot of excitement over the topic. So we're going to pipe them down just a little bit. If I had some water, I'd throw at the boxes here. I need some proverbial water to throw at the boxes here. But I do want to hear from Mr. CEO here. What have you learned? And then we're going to move on because folks are sending some questions that I want you guys to be able to attack tonight. In the healing process, Minister CEO, what have you learned?
Yeah, there's so much that I'm hearing tonight about capacity and about relationships. And one of the things that I've learned is that our relationships are not created equal. Not all connections are divine connections. They are not. And not all relationships are intended to last forever. Woo! Just like the seasons of our lives change and just like we grow, We outgrow people. The Lord has to prune some things out of our lives. And so I have learned to let go and let God.
Jesus.
There
Yeah,
are folks that cannot go with me to my next
Some
level.
emojis that we
There
can
are
put
folks
on
that are not willing to do the work.
Theo,
They don't want this
Theo,
healing.
you
They
are
don't want,
fanning the flames.
they do not want healing right now. They don't want to go deeper in God. And so if I'm seeking the face of God and I'm seeking to be in right relationship, then I have to understand that some of those relationships will be severed. They will not, some people are just not going to go with you to the next level. And you have to be okay with letting go. And I am guilty of loyalty to a fault.
To a fault.
I am guilty. And I'm also guilty of being a woman of great capacity, meaning that I can do whatever, right? I can do a lot of things well, but that doesn't mean that that's what God intended for me to do. And so I've often ended up in situations and in places connected to things and people that I had no business in.
Yeah.
So, question for you, Theo. How did we transition? How do we transition? Because I think that's one of the major problems that occurs with this situation. So I'm in a place and I know that God is speaking to me and he said that my season is up. It is time for me to transition. And I go to leadership and I say, this is the situation. And I don't believe that just because it's time for me to transition into another space and time for me, that we got to be out of relationship. Like, even if we're not, the relationship don't look the same as it did in the season that it was previously, but I don't think we got to have a problem just because it's time for me to go. So how do we transition without any of all this foolishness?
So that's a loaded question, right? That's a loaded question because we're called to disciple. And so whether we're talking about business or the church, if we're going to be effective leaders, we should be discipling leaders and know and understand that the time will come where these leaders will move on to their next. But many people struggle. And I have been in that situation many times where the Lord has said it's time to shift, but there's not understanding there. Or it's time to shift, but because you want to hold on, you don't release. But I will say that obedience is better than sacrifice. God's voice has to be the voice. It has to be God's voice. If we're in right communion with the Father, we have to obey the Father and the voice of God when God instructs us. It does get difficult when we have to manage those relationships. But at the end of the day, I do believe that God will speak to the man and the woman of God. I do believe God speaks to all of us, and I do believe God will speak to the man or the woman, but we have to be careful that we are obedient and that we're following the voice of God and not caught up in soul ties or in loyalty, right? And allow those things. I've been guilty of staying in a place too long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, my.
And that is when you will now see the frustration. The Lord will begin to push you out of a space, and that's the hard way. That's not how you want to learn.
Right.
Move when God says move, so you don't have to go through the pain and the frustration of the Lord pushing you out of a place because you've outgrown it.
Overstaying.
I've had many conversations about staying in a place too long.
We got to get to some of these questions from the folks. It's hot like popcorn. It's hot like popcorn. I swear I need some emojis. I need like the popcorn to go. I need the fire. I got like my own creative idea.
Can I just say one thing? Can I just say one thing?
Go ahead.
Just one thing about this. Real quick. The quality of the relationship, it comes out in a situation like this.
Of course.
You see the quality of the relationship. That's all I'm going to say.
Wow. You can't say nothing like that and then move on
and be like, that's it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Look,
you just said that and dropped the mic and left.
Yeah.
Our folks is talking to you guys. And this is a great question. And again, we had the same experience, like I already said. What do you do when you're at a place of wanting to reconcile or make amends, or however you want to look at it, and the other party is not there yet? What do you guys do?
You gotta KIM. You gotta keep it moving.
Yeah.
Keep
Right.
everything moving.
Keep everything moving. Keep it moving. Like Dr. Derren said, forgive them, forgive you, pray about it, seek, keep the door open. Keep the door open, but don't be condemned and contained because of it.
Wow.
I think the thing here, remember that forgiveness is not about the other person, and that reconciliation requires two people, right? If there's an exchange in a relationship, there is an exchange. And so in order for reconciliation to happen, both parties have to be willing to reconcile. However, our personal inner work of forgiveness and healing is not about the other person or the offense. It's really about being able to release that and make sure that we're not harboring that thing, because essentially it's poisoning our inner man or poisoning our spirit. And so we have to be able to forgive and let go. We can make every attempt at reconciliation. We can do what the Bible says. We can even use a mediator. We can follow that. But if the other person is still not willing to reconcile, then wipe the dust off your feet and keep it moving.
And that's biblical,
That's
in
it.
case anybody wants to know.
Dr. D, you want to get in there, or you good?
No, those responses were so great. I want to keep going.
You're going to take that. So the other question is for parents who this broken relationships have impacted their children. How do you help young people, your children? How do you help your seed to get over the situation? And a lot of times, sometimes kids may be even too young to even understand why we bouncing from house to house, and you might not even have the language to give them and all of that. But what can you say to the parents that are dealing with how this affects children, because they can be collateral damage?
I think the same way we shield our kids from everything else, that we need to shield them from that. I think that while I was dealing with mine, my kids were too young to really understand. But even as we transition and move into different assignments, I have to be real mindful of the conversation that I'm having. If I'm in a sharing opportunity with my wife and my kids are around, I don't want them to grow up and look at the church differently, to think that God is not reachable or approachable. And so I'm very concerned about my space. Now, if in fact the kids have learned or have seen something, or something has just kind of come to them, I immediately address it right away and help them to understand that, we're going to pray and let people off the hook, but we really want to make sure that we're able to manage the situation so that they feel safe. But oftentimes allowing our kids to understand, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have seen that, but you saw it, it happened. Let's address it. Let's deal with it. And let's not make them think that they're crazy, that what they really saw, they didn't see. No, let's deal with it. And then, let's just kind of push them to do what we've been talking about and just kind of move on, forgive the people, and then just kind of move on.
See, this is my area. I work with kids, and we underestimate how much kids internalize, what they're processing and what they're going through. And so I agree with you, Pastor. We need to address it. We need to talk about it, not be afraid to talk about it, not be afraid to talk about what it brought up, right? And then we go right to the word. What is the fruit of the Spirit? Was that a demonstration of the fruit of the Spirit? Absolutely not. All right, so what are we going to do? What does the Bible tell us to do? Yes, we have to forgive, but we have to help our children process what they've experienced, right? Affirm and validate what they're experiencing so they know they're not crazy, because a lot of times we feel crazy ourselves.
Right.
But our children experience that without half of the coping tools that we have, without the capacity that we have. And so it's important that as parents, we not be afraid to have those hard conversations with our children, and that we're able to lead them back to the Bible and instruct them, okay, baby, well, what does love say? How can we love this person? How can we pray for this person? Right? And understanding too that sometimes relationships will be severed. I've been through that, where my kids will ask me, well, Mom, where's so-and-so? We used to hang with so-and-so, but what happened? And obviously I have to shield them and I can't tell them the entire story, but I have to be willing to have that honest conversation with them and then lead them back to what God says. Lead them back to the word of God. Talk to them about what love is, what forgiveness is, and everything that comes up. And not for nothing, but sometimes I know situations where I've been in churches where children are attacked without you even knowing it. you know, where children are put in positions. And so I think it's super important that as adults, we be those people that stand up and say, you know what, this is unacceptable. This is not godly behavior. This is not godly character. And I won't allow you to treat my child, my niece, my nephew, or little Susie, whose parents aren't in the church, like that.
How about that?
Absolutely.
I agree. I think that we should definitely understand that children are in some of these relationships that we're in with the same people. I know in instances, in experiences where we've come from, some of the relationships that were broken with the children, where some of the adults were godparents to the children and play aunties and uncles to the children. So you can't not have those conversations, because sometimes it's been many instances where those people were closer to your children than they were closer to people that they were blood related to. So I think that it is you do no service to not having the conversation. You really do need to have the conversation, because they are missing relationships too. They are broken for them as well. It affects their ability to trust again. It affects their ability to forgive, especially when they have missing pieces and they don't really know what's happening or what's going on. So I agree with all that has been said about, but I think the most important thing is having the conversation with your children at whatever level they are, whatever level they can understand it. Have the conversation with them so they're not wondering or left to leave things to the imagination about what has happened.
I have one more thing I want to add there that just came to me as I was listening. Also knowing that sometimes people make assumptions when relationships are broken in the church. So I would say there's always room for us to be authentic and genuine in our interactions with other people. And what I mean by that is, just because I left the church doesn't mean that I don't value our relationship. And so it is perfectly okay for me to reach out and say, hey, you know what? We're not there anymore, but Johnny and Louie love each other, and I love you guys as a family. And so are we good? Can we continue to have a relationship? Like, I think sometimes that's the stuff we're afraid to do, right? Because we make assumptions that I left that church or I left that place, and it's hard for me to put all that stuff aside and to separate whatever happened from the other people that were there. And so I think, you know, being willing to do that as well. And I have done that. You know, I've left places, but have held on to relationships that are valuable to me, that are divine, that when I look at it now, I thank God that these people and these families are a part of our lives, and that has transcended a place because they're divine.
Absolutely.
But had I not reached out, I don't know that necessarily would have happened, or had they not reached out to me. Someone had to be willing to reach out.
Yeah, I think that highlights, CO, that highlights, and it demonstrates again who we are really in relationship with. Are we in relationship with one another? Are we in relationship with that building? Are we in relationship with the systems that are built around that building? Or are we developing relationship with one another? And we are called to be in relationship with one another.
Right.
So we have one more question we want to drop for you guys before we get out. And we also want to give you just like a millisecond to give some last words before we end. Dr. Stackhouse will give her our last question. And you guys, again, give like some parting words in like the fewest of seconds you can configure once you answer the question. And this is powerful. So let's. So
this is our final question, and we probably might have to have a follow up to this, but I want to know what has been your experience with reconciliation,
particularly your efforts, the things that you have actually tried to do.
With your efforts.
That's such an excellent question. Like in your tryings, what has happened?
What have you been met with?
So I'll go first and just I'll be very brief. Some reconciliation has been powerful and healing, and some has not been. You know, I have not been able to really reconcile, right, with some people, because some may have passed away, or just we weren't able to meet on the same ground around it. So I have mixed experiences with reconciliation, but the door is always open for me. The door is always open. And in my parting words, this is what I'll say, that we are the church that the gates of hell shall not prevail against. We are the church that when he arrives, we will be without spot or wrinkle. That's my parting words.
Well, now, I'll just say that my initial hurt probably spans over probably about 17 years. And so there has been countless times to reconcile, and reconciliation, and I think forgiveness and healing has taken place. But one of the things that I learned throughout the process is that what I thought I wanted, I really didn't. What I learned was that I was operating out of a different pot now. And oftentimes when we're dealing with something, all of you, if you have a green thumb, you'll recognize that when you plant a plant, sometimes you'll have to get to a place where you have to run to the Home Depot and you'll have to get a bigger plant because you've outgrown the space that the former plant occupied.
Yeah.
So I got to a place where I no longer wanted to go back to the space that held the space that I used to occupy. My life, my countenance.
Wow.
I've outgrown that. And so what I would say in closing is don't underestimate who you are, and recognize that when we grow, because that's what we're ultimately supposed to do, we're supposed to grow. Never feel bad about not fitting into a space that you once occupied, because every round with the God we serve, every round goes higher and higher.
Jesus.
And so I don't ever, it won't fit if you try to fit an 11 and a 9.5.
My.
It will continue to hurt. But if you go to a larger size and a larger space, you'll find out that, you know what, I'll fill a larger space, in the space that I thought I really wanted and the people that I thought I really wanted. You'll learn that God had something even greater for you.
Capacity. Sounds like capacity.
Capacity.
Increase.
Sounds like capacity.
Increase.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He said it all.
Did he say it all?
He
You
said
have any
it all.
parting words?
He said it all.
No, he said the parting words too.
I don't have any parting words except that the Lord desires for us all to be whole and healed. And
Yes.
so we can't go back to those
We're
former
not going back.
places.
We're not going back.
That's good.
All right,
That's
Doc, take
good.
us out of here. Take us out
That's
of
good.
here.
I want to piggyback off of something that Dr. Derren said about not being afraid to move into those greater spaces. One of the things we got to keep in mind, sometimes when God moves us, when he originally moves us, we don't instantly fill that space. Sometimes he puts us in a bigger space and he grows us in that space. And that's the thing that scares us. When we get into a space and we've not occupied that whole space, we become afraid. And that's what makes us want to retreat and go back to the former place. Yeah. But I want to encourage you to stay in the new place and allow God to grow you in that place. Yeah. Occupy until he comes.
Jesus.
Yes. You know what I will say to Dr. Stackhouse and Dr. Brown? I really believe that we need a part 2 of this, because I absolutely love the panelists.
I agree.
The panelists were handpicked for tonight with an anointing to bless the lives of the people. So I think that we need a part 2.
I agree. I concur.
We are so excited. We thank you guys immensely. And listen, we're not stopping. We really are not stopping. We have no form for this. We have no structure for this, but we have an assignment to attack this issue in some way, shape, or form. And however we get there, we are going to go there. And so we thank you for your time and your experience, your seasoning, all that has been put into this. You definitely will be back again. And we just appreciate, I hear my sister saying, the transparency, the authenticity. Nobody is trying to, you know how we do. Nobody's trying to do the thing that we do that we normally do. So we just
We don't do that here. We don't do that here. Everybody has a contribution. We don't do that
like
here.
a platform service where you got preached better than the person before you.
That's what I mean. That's the thing. See, I didn't want to say it.
We don't do that here. We don't do that here.
That's not the thing.
We don't do that. Everybody has some value to contribute to this platform. That's why we invited people here. We're not trying to outdo anybody.
That's right.
Everybody has valuable input.
Y'all bless my whole life.
We bless each other's life.
Good stuff. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you are on YouTube, please subscribe. I mean, this is quality here. So just go on down the button, subscribe, do what you do. Meet us back at the appointed time. We'll continue to advertise the Last Supper. If you're on Facebook, thank you so much for your comments and the feedback that you gave us. Continue to send your questions, your ideas to the email that we set off. And again, we are going, we are moving, and we thank these panelists and we thank you for tuning in. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Good night. Awesome. So are we out?
You out.